Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a horror movie review and I'll be having a look at Fright Night 2, New Blood. So this is actually a 2013 movie, not the original Fright Night 2 movie film that was based obviously on the original movie. Now there's one thing I'm going to have to get abundantly clear before I go into this review. This film is not a sequel to the 2011 movie that starred Colin Farrell. This is actually a remake of once again, the original movie. That's right. So it's been remade again. Now you can actually class this as the third remake. Obviously you've had the original 2011 remake with Colin Farrell. You've got this one. And there's also a movie called Never Cry Werewolf, which was, again, it was a remake, but just replacing a vampire with a werewolf. So this is the third time this story has been retold. So there are a couple of differences here. So first and foremost, the story actually takes place in Romania. And what we've got here is a kind of bunch of college students on a kind of, I guess, some kind of foreign exchange sort of trip to Romania to sort of learn about the sort of cultural studies and what have you. You've got all the same characters. You've obviously got Charley, Bruce, you've got Amy, you've got Evil Ed, and they're off to Romania. So you don't have that sort of situation where you did in the other films where you kind of have this, you know, this mysterious stranger moving next door. So that's actually not in this movie. There is obviously a vampire in it, and that's actually a she rather than a he, but she is called Gerri Dandridge, and basically she just is living in a hotel across the road by the looks of it. But that kind of aspect of it really isn't sort of played up all that much. But other than that, it's very much kind of business as usual. Obviously, Charley Brewster ultimately sort of discovers that there's this kind of vampire across the road from him. And it turns out it's actually this kind of college lecturer played by Jaime Murray as Gerri Dandridge. And it turns out that this could well be Elizabeth Bathory. So if you're not aware who that is, this is kind of one of these kind of famous figures in history, very much like Vlad the Impaler and that kind of thing. So basically this movie sort of sets up Gerri Dandridge to actually be Elizabeth Bathory, which is again a kind of departure from the original movie. And her motivation is obviously she's tried to sort of unlock her curse where she can kind of go out in the daylight and what have you. And her, her deal is she likes to kind of bathe in the blood of virgins and all that sort of stuff. But other than that, it kind of follows the sort of same basic premise as the original Fright Night. Charley Bruce discovers obviously that she's a vampire, sort of tries to warn her friends. They go and try and find the horror host Peter Vincent, and in this movie he's actually kind of one of these kind of like ghost hunters on the sort of TV, like the kind of like found footage type things. So together, obviously, first of all, there's some doubts. Obviously, they question whether Charley is actually, you know, some kind of crazy person. But eventually, obviously, they kind of get to believing him and ultimately try and face down this vampire on her own turf. So it really is just the same story once again, which I really don't know why they did that. And I actually think that it was a bad move, because I think Fright Night as a kind of film franchise, you know, to be honest, these days it's not a huge name. The 2011 movie didn't do all that well, and it's more of a kind of cult hit. And I think the fans of this film, you know, are going to be aware of it and maybe a little bit sort of peed off that this film is once again kind of just retelling the same story. I think the better option would have simply been to remake Fright Night 2. Or just not call it Fright Night and just call it a kind of a vampire film. But it does have some decent qualities, this movie. But I think the problem is it's going to get some heat because it's just another remake. And I think that's going to be to its detriment. So what is good about this movie? Well, the first thing I'll tell you is that Jaime Murray as Gerri Dandridge, I think, is really good. She makes a very good vampire. She does a great job of being this kind of very, very seductive type of like woman. And, you know, she's kind of quite threatening as well in sort of certain degrees. You know, I quite like her as much as I like Regine in the original Fright Night 2. There are a couple of instances where she kind of hams it up a little bit, kind of snarling to the camera when there's not anyone else around and things like that. But overall, I thought she did a great job, and you know, she looked fantastic as the vampire. The other thing I would say, I think the effects are pretty decent in this movie. Obviously, it's a lower budget, kind of straight to DVD film, but I actually think the effects aren't too bad here. You know, there's some reasonable gore effects. There's lots of sort of practical makeup and kind of visual effects and things like that. I think the set design looks pretty decent. So in regards to how the film looks, you know, I liked it. So the negatives of this movie. So one of the problems I have with this film is the characters are all fairly unlikable. The guy who plays Charlie Brewster just seems like a dick. He's not a likeable character. In pretty much all the other sort of versions that we've seen of these kind of Fright Night film, you know, you kind of get behind him. He's maybe a bit dorky, but ultimately, you can kind of root for him as the hero. In this one, he just seems like a bit of a dick, and you kind of want the vampire to win at the end of the day. And that's true of the other characters as well. Amy just seems like a bimbo. Peter Vincent just seems like an asshole. So I don't think any of the kind of like the protagonists, if you like, are particularly likeable characters whatsoever. The acting wasn't bad for those guys, I have to say, though, to be fair. You know, it wasn't anything amazing, but, you know, they did a passable job with this type of film. There are a couple of kind of lapses in logic in this movie that kind of did bug me a little bit. There's one scene where kind of Charlie, actually, if you've seen the other versions, Charlie sort of sneaks into Gerri Dandridge's lair, and for some reason, he just manages to find this kind of secret passage literally straight away, which is kind of hidden behind this bookcase, and it just literally seems to go straight there without any prior knowledge, which I just didn't. It was a bit silly. There's a couple of instances where there's just things that are a little bit sort of too convenient and that kind of thing. The other issue I have with this film is the climax of this movie is a confusing mess. I won't go into what it is, but it does kind of change. That does change relatively significantly from the original movie, and there's certain things that happen within that don't really make a lot of sense. Now, I won't go into it because it is a kind of fairly major spoiler, but if you've seen the movie, I'd like to hear your opinions about what you thought of the actual climax and what happened there, because I wasn't a big fan of it. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me, and you know, it wasn't very good, quite frankly. So overall, it was a bit of a strange movie, because I think it would have been better served if it was kind of had no real ties to the Fright Night movie, because I think that's going to, as I say, just annoy people, because it is just another remake, and people maybe were expecting a sequel, and ultimately I reckon this will get heat because of that. But overall, it wasn't a too bad of a vampire film, but it did have some kind of it did have some problems, but it was, I would say, you know, if you're looking at it on the kind of B-movie scale, if you like, it's probably slightly better than average. So I'm going to give this one a 5.5. Not bad, but I wouldn't go in there with too high of expectations. What did you think of it? Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.